Hi, I'm Joey Lott, and this is another video in the series that I call Ask Consciousness Anything. And the purpose of this series is your freedom. The purpose of this series is your awakening. The purpose of this series is to point you to discover and look directly for yourself who you really are. So today I've got a question. It's right over here, as they often are, and I'm going to read it. It says, hard for me to clearly articulate this question, but what is a practice to return to awareness when a person is caught up in the trance of thought or feeling which seems so compelling? Resting as awareness seems much easier when one is not compelled by a thought or feeling. It often feels like I'm trying to talk myself back to awareness or efforting to get back to awareness. Further, how to get back to awareness when there seems to be a lot of emotion, sensation, and resistance to that sensation. So this is a wonderful question or set of questions. And let's just take a look at, there's kind of a complex of questions, so let's look at them one at a time. What is a practice to return to awareness when caught up in the trance of thought or feeling, which seems so compelling? So if you were to call this a practice, I guess you could call it a practice, but I would really not call it a practice. I would call it simply a recognition. And so the recognition comes through looking. And so it's an honest inquiry to look or see or discover what it is that is prior to any of that, what it is that is during all of that and after all of that. And so we're really looking to see in our direct experience what it is that's always here, what it is that does not come and go. And that's what we're calling awareness. So obviously we're not looking for a thing called awareness. I say obviously, but that's really worth pointing out. So we're not saying, or I'm not saying, that you should try to find a state called awareness or a feeling called awareness or a thought or belief or concept called awareness. Because you can see that all of that is actually more mind stuff. And I don't have a problem with the mind. The mind is perfectly fine. It's wonderful. It's a part of creation. So we don't need to get rid of it. I often say, the aim of many spiritual practices seems to be to get rid of the mind. And you really might want to be careful about that, because if you had no mind, you might not function. And anyway, the mind is not a problem. It just appears to be a problem when we're fixated on it. And so if we're fixated on it, then we're only giving our attention to thoughts about awareness, and you can notice that those thoughts are speculative. And so what happens is we get some experience, and maybe that experience is a subtler experience. Maybe it's a softer, quieter experience. Maybe it's a more expansive experience. And so it points to something, it indicates something, it shows us something of ourselves. And that's wonderful. There's an awesome opportunity there. We could say that when we recognize ourselves in and through states, then there's a possibility of awakening there. That's an awakening, the recognition of yourself, regardless of the state. However, what you can see is that the mind then has its commentary. It speculates about what this is. And it starts to label and define, and it says, oh, wow, that state, that's awareness. That experience is awareness. And so then there's a tell here, because it says to return to awareness. And I understand that language is always troublesome, and so to the person who's asking this question, please be willing just to hear this honest, sincere response and to hear it directly, and don't get caught up in any reaction of the mind to this or to any belief that says maybe I've misunderstood the question or that I'm being too picky with the language, because regardless of the fact that language is always going to be have some troublesome qualities to it when we're talking about describing awareness or describing the truth of who we are. Nonetheless, there are certain things that are revealed in the language that we use. And so to return to awareness, in this case, indicates that there's still some state that the mind is associating or labeling as awareness. And what we're wanting to do here is not to get stuck on that state or trying to return to or maintain a state. Rather, we're wanting to see what it is that's always here. That is what I'm saying is awareness. Now, it is true that sometimes our attention is stuck in thought, and sometimes we can allow that attention to rest. And it might seem to the mind that then the goal is to somehow force attention to always rest. But that's only another thought. And it only seems like that's necessary in thought. So if we give attention to mind, and that thought arises, and we are not and we're just in the habit of fixating on thought, and we haven't yet recognized with greater clarity what it is that does not come and go, what it is that's always here, allowing all of that, then we can overlook what it is that's always here, and instead we can give our attention to these ideas, the speculation. And then it can seem that awareness comes and goes and that we have to get back to it. But always, so you're asking for a practice or a way, and so always when this happens, instantly, to even be able to ask this question, there's awareness. It's not awareness as a state. It's not a particular feeling or an idea, but it's the direct recognition that you are aware. You are aware of thought. You are aware of sensation. You are aware, in fact, that you are aware. And so everything that happens, particularly if there's some pain or discomfort or fear or anxiety or stress involved, then it's pointing you to yourself as awareness. Now, this isn't obvious to the mind because the conditioning says otherwise for most of us. So we're not going to find confirmation of this in mind, so don't bother. I mean, you can certainly try. Most of us have tried. I tried for a very long time. But ultimately, and I can save you a great deal of time if you just hear this now, ultimately, you will not find the answer there, and it's a huge waste of time to continue looking for the answer there, and you will discover the directness and intimacy of true freedom if you just stop looking there. And so this is the power of attention. It seems initially as though there's some kind of restraint necessary, and this is why it can seem like you have to get back to some state, because it seems as though there's some kind of restraint or behavior necessary to get to this discovery or this recognition. But actually, if you're just observant, if you just are willing right now just to pause and notice that there's effort required to give attention to thought. You can notice actually every evening, assuming you sleep in the evening, but every 24 hours or so, each of us normally sleeps. And you might have thoughts that say, well, I sleep too much, or I don't sleep enough, or my sleep schedule is weird, or whatever. But the point here is just that each of us has this experience of sleep. And if you're observant, you'll notice that you cannot rest fully. You cannot allow yourself to fall asleep if you're continuing to give attention to thoughts. Right? There is a moment of release, of letting go. And so you can tell that there's actually effort involved. If you've observed this at all, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't observed it, then just pay attention right now. And notice how much effort is required to give attention to thought. Look in your direct experience. You'll notice there's a contraction, a fixation, a focus that's required. Efforting, trying to understand, compare, figure it out, get it right. And it's possible right now, just for an instant, to drop that. Don't try to maintain it. That won't help. That just is another thought, actually, that you need to maintain it. But just for an instant, just for a second, you can notice that you can drop all effort. You don't need to fixate on thought. And as soon as you drop the effort, as soon as you are just not giving your attention, not making the effort for one instant, in this one instant, you might notice that there's spacious freedom, awareness, not as a concept, but as an intimate, direct experience of yourself. Now, to label it as consciousness or awareness or freedom or any of those things is, you'd have to go to mind. So I'm not proposing that you need to do that. I'm not saying that you need to compare this to your idea of freedom or compare this to your idea of enlightenment or compare this to your idea of anything. But actually, just for this one instant, you can notice that there is, in your direct experience, being. You are aware. This is primary. And so this is actually always here. And the real secret of successful direct self-inquiry, which is the most direct means that I am aware of recognizing who you are, clarifying this recognition. And it's extremely powerful. It's very, very powerful. In fact, this one process, broadly defined as direct self-inquiry. We can have lots of processes by which we can approach it, right? Because we could come from this angle, we could come from this angle, we could come from this angle, and really every experience in your life is offering you this opportunity. So it's infinitely many angles and perspectives and possibilities for discovering anew in this moment the clarity of who you are. So the practice, if you want to call it a practice, is that no matter what is happening, allow that to be the gateway for the inquiry. Because it's always about your direct experience. It's not about a particular state, feeling, experience, idea, concept, sensation, or any of the rest of it. It's about recognizing that all of that comes and goes. And the only way that you can recognize that, really truly recognize it, is to actually just be willing to pause. So again, I'll invite you right now to pause. And you can notice that, again, there was effort. There's this momentum that we're feeding into, unconsciously most of the time, that just continues this reactivity, this fixation on thought, this constant doubting, constant fear, constant anxiety, constant paranoia. And you might say, oh, I'm not particularly fearful or anxious or worried or paranoid. And that's fine. We have varying degrees of expression or awareness of that. But fundamentally, if you look, you will see that not recognizing yourself as you are, as that which is always here, does generate this anxiety, because the fixation on mind reveals to us, actually, and this is the irony of it, actually, is that the real revelation of fixation on mind is that it as soon as you take a look at this, you see that fixation on mind reveals the absolute spaciousness of consciousness that you are. You are aware always of your thoughts, your mind, your experience, your sensations. You are aware. So that fixation seems to be a problem only as another thought, but instantly upon recognizing this, upon seeing this, which is available to you moment to moment just by pausing and just recognizing, just noticing in your direct experience that you are aware, you exist, and that this is prior to any thought. So the fixation happens sometimes, but that fixation arises in awareness. So there's nothing that you need to get back to. There's no way for you to get out of awareness. And in fact, awareness is always at rest. So I understand that I use language that sometimes, because of the nature of language, if it's taken too literally, can be confusing. But if you are willing to look for yourself, this is the most important thing, because the words are never it. The ideas are never it. And you've probably heard that before, but hear it now. Be willing to hear it now. Really, freshly. Don't turn to mind to give you, do I agree with that or do I not agree with that? Look right now, openly, honestly, and notice that you have this capacity to just pause and notice that you are, and notice that this is not a thought. You don't need a thought to tell you that you are. There might be a thought that says, I am. There might be a thought that says, I'm not sure I am. There might be all kinds of thoughts. But the simple fact is, prior to the arising of any thought, you are aware. This is your most intimate experience of yourself. And so during every thought, you are aware. And after every thought, you are aware. And you can just check this out and see, not as another thought, not as a belief, not as some little ritual mantra that you recite to remind you and give you a little hit of okayness, but to actually have the total courage, because it requires real courage, to really honestly be willing to drop the pretense, to drop the efforting, to drop the self-protecting mechanism, to drop the fearful running for one instant, just one instant. And just notice that you are. And notice how deeply restful this is. Not necessarily as an idea of what rest should be, but to really tune in to the actual direct experience of yourself as you really truly are. That which doesn't come and go. And you can see that this most intimate experience of yourself is always at rest. So we're getting clarification through this repeated inquiry about what it is that's always at rest. At first, the mind tends to continue to have a lot of commentary about it, and it keeps seeking because we're still in the habit of giving attention to it. But the more that we inquire, the clearer that gets. The clearer the power of attention gets, the clearer that the choice gets. It's really ongoing. That choice, the choice of creativity, of the creative expression of your soul and your desire and your life gets clearer and clearer. So at first, most of us come to this because we feel like we're victims. We feel like life is happening to us. It's being done to us. And it feels bad, and we feel like we're struggling and suffering, and we don't know what to do. Even if our life is pretty good in some respects, there's just a sense of, something's not right. We are still being run by something. We're afraid, and we run. We try to avoid certain aspects of our experience. There's certain things that we try to arrange our lives to avoid so that we don't have to meet that. But we don't realize it, but we're causing our own suffering by doing that. And so moment to moment, you can just start to check it out and notice that every experience, everything that happens, it just offers you, it's like a little bell going off. And if you just let it points you back to just notice that you are. I'm going to look to see if I've answered the question successfully. So the next part of the question says, resting as awareness seems much easier when one is not compelled by a thought or feeling. Yes. So this is wonderful. You will see that the compulsion that you are describing is actually your own power. It's your own power which has been inadvertently misused. And it's been misused only because you have assumed that fear meant that there was something wrong with you, something wrong for you, and that you needed to do something about that you needed to avoid it, or fight it, or fix it, or somehow do something. So, I kind of forgot the question, so I'm going to look at it again here. Yeah, right, so the compulsion, if you start to notice, you'll see that the compulsion does not actually force you to do anything. You have choice. You can choose, but it requires that you are willing to pause and to notice that choice. And it often is helpful to sort of slow it down. And this is an amazing power that we have. And you can notice it right now. So no matter what the intensity of the experience right now, so maybe it's a mild intensity or maybe it's a greater intensity, check it out, both. It's really important to check it out in all circumstances in your life, particularly when there's higher intensity. And when you check it out, you'll see, just slow it down. So right now, whatever the experience is, notice that you can just pause and just drop the effort for a moment. And you can notice that it actually just kind of slows down. May even get a sense of timelessness. And you can start to see your experience taking shape, forming, moving, arising. And you can see that you've been fixated on thought and its commentary telling you what all of this is and what it means and what you need to do. But you're aware of the thought. You're aware of the sensation. You're aware of your own experience in all of its facets. It's all arising in you. So just check that out and see that that's so. And you can see that compulsion is it's just energy. It's movement, sensation. It's just in its raw form, in its pure form. It's just energy. Now, as an idea, that doesn't do you a whole lot of good. But if you're willing to look directly and not turn to thought for a moment, you'll see it's just happening, just energy. You don't know what this is. But the mind will tell you, if you turn to the mind will tell you, this is a compulsion, there's fear, I've got to do something, I should be worried, I got to fix something. It's going to tell you. But you can see again that you're aware of that, you're aware of the sensation, you're aware of all of it. It's all arising and it's all equal. It's not what the mind says it is. You can see it's just energy, just movement, just life. I say just. It's life. It's the awesome power of life. It's the awesome power of yourself. But we've mistakenly believed that it was what the mind had to say. So if you slow it down in this way, you can start to see that nothing forces you to do anything. You have choice. And that primary choice is where you will place your attention. And the most powerful thing you can do is just to remain for a moment. Don't worry about sustaining this or maintaining it, but just for a moment, particularly when there's high intensity. Just to remain still for a moment, just to pause and allow yourself to just be aware of the experience, right? You're already aware of the experience, but to just pause and allow that awareness without giving attention to all the other stuff for a moment. So we're not getting rid of it. We're not trying to change it. We're not doing anything with it. We're just noticing. So when you do this, particularly with high intensity, what you'll start to see happening is that things are changing, because there's a power in this. When we're giving our attention to thought, fixating on thought, that frequency is being enlivened. Now, if you don't like that frequency, the frequency of fear, anxiety, depression, worry, stress, you kind of want to start to ask yourself, why are you giving so much attention to it? It's like you really don't like horror movies, but you keep going to the theater and watching horror movies. And you kind of got to ask yourself after a while, why are you still doing that? But of course, until we recognize that, we don't know we have a choice. But by slowing it down in this way, you can start to notice. You just pause and just observe, and you'll see, oh yeah, there's intensity, the intensity of life. That intensity of life, it's actually in my direct experience. That's myself. That's the aliveness that is my own source, that's moving and flowing. And the mind has its commentary. It says, no, this is bad. This is anger. This is fear. This is frustration. This is worry. This is anxiety. This is depression. Can't allow this. That's the mind's commentary. Got to fix it. But you can just pause and notice in your direct experience. Just pause. It's totally obvious. It's very simple. Through this, particularly with high intensity, it always works, but because it's just, we're talking about just kind of the mechanics of how things are. So when you're willing, regardless of the intensity, to just pause and observe in this way, without making effort to go toward or away from any of your direct experience, then what's happening is that we're entraining to this frequency of inclusivity, of allowing, of flow, of awareness, of being. Okay, so there's a frequency, and it's inclusive. And it receives all. So it includes all frequencies. It receives all frequencies. It's just a metaphor, but it's like white light is the full spectrum, contains the full spectrum. So it's like the full rainbow and beyond, right, is contained in that. So what's more powerful? This frequency of separation, or the frequency of being, which includes that frequency, which receives that frequency and integrates that frequency, which is so not separate that it can even absorb separation. And so we actually have this amazing power just to rest for a moment and notice this. And as we do, then there's a transformation. Sometimes it's very dramatic, sometimes not so much. It doesn't matter. But you'll start to see that groove of that habit. It's in the nervous system, that groove in the nervous system of the pathways that have been worn by this particular frequency, fixation on this particular frequency. So that seems to become our whole reality. But in an instant of resting and training to the frequency of being, there's a transformation, there's an integration of that frequency of separation. Because in the light of clarity, of totality and non-separation, the frequency of separation is seen for what it is. It's integrated and received fully in the reality of non-separation. So that process is extraordinarily simple. It's just whatever's happening, pause and just observe in your own direct experience and see what's happening. Now, if you really want to make that even more powerful, then just increase the frequency. And you'll start to see, and what I mean by frequency, I'm using frequency several ways here. It's interesting. But the frequency, in this case, I mean of how frequently you inquire. And many people find that at first it seems like a doing, and in fact, many people set an alarm. In the Access Points program, it's an 8-week training that we do with people, and we share these 5 simple inquiries. They're profoundly simple and powerful ways to access yourself, to access that clarity of yourself, of being, to access that frequency of inclusivity and receiving in any moment of your life. And as people do this, well, what I want to say there is that at the beginning of this, most people, or many people, set an alarm. They get an app on their phone and set an alarm 5 times a day, so that they're just inquiring, shifting in this very simple way. It doesn't take time, really. I mean, we're talking, if any time, we're talking literally seconds to shift. And then what starts to happen is it starts to show what the mechanics of what's going on, and we start to see the mechanics of suffering, and we start to see that we have this power of attention, and that everything that's happening, everything in our experience is pointing us to inquire, pointing us to discover who we are. And so as that clarity dawns and grows and blossoms, what starts to happen is the inquiry comes alive, and everything starts to be the trigger for the inquiry. And this is relevant to this question, because then what starts to happen is when the compulsion is arising, that compulsion becomes a trigger. It's like the bell that rings, and instantly, because the access point or the inquiry has been activated for the person, it's just alive. It's just like a little switch. It's just a reminder. It's like ding, 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 ding. And you just look. Oh, yeah, here I am. It just causes you to just pause and drop it all for a moment and just notice what's here, what's always here. Hope I've answered the question, but let me just see if there's more. Yeah, it says, I often feel like I'm trying to talk myself back to awareness, or efforting to get back to awareness. So I hope that that's clear, that you don't need to do that, that all that's required is just to pause and notice. The tendency is to want to get confirmation in the mind. You will not get confirmation in the mind. I think I already said that. That will save you a huge amount of time. Really, honestly, you can just drop that entirely. It's actually possible, and this is one of the access points, is don't believe your mind. Debum. So in the Access Points program, we actually activate this access point so that it's really clear for you that you literally have the ability to just drop it. You don't have to believe your mind. And the truth is, you don't have to believe your mind at all. That's not the intended function of mind. Mind is not intended. It's not its highest, clearest, purest purpose to be constantly reminding us of fear. That's not what it is here for. And so we're misusing it if we keep looking to it for confirmation. And this is so important. So don't make that mistake. Don't believe that you have to turn to the mind to give you confirmation that you're doing it right, because that's a mistake that many people make. There's just pause, accessing, inquiry, recognition, and then we turn back to mind and we say, well, how am I doing? And mind will say, no, I think you got it right. Or will say, no, awesome, good job, but keep it up, it will say. Right? It says, if you did it right, it will say, awesome, great job, but now you got to keep doing it. Try harder. Get this forever. Or it will say, you're a loser, you're bad, you're stupid, you didn't get it right, you're never going to get this. I mean, whatever the mind's commentary, if you're looking for confirmation, you'll never get that because the mind can't grasp this. You got things flipped around if you're looking to the mind for confirmation, because you can start to see that the mind is arising in you, in consciousness, in awareness. And it's very, very simple. You can just see that you are aware. Awareness is primary. Without awareness, there's no thought. Without spaciousness, there's no thought. Without clarity, there's no thought. So thought is dependent upon you, but you're not dependent upon thought. Thought cannot know who you are, but you can know who you are. So you can directly recognize yourself instantly, right now, just by pausing, dropping it. Just for an instant, just observing, noticing, resting for one moment, no effort. Don't turn to the mind for one instant. And that's enough. Don't give any more concern to the mind's commentary. You literally could not believe the mind at all. Not get rid of the mind, or hate the mind, or change the mind, or fix the mind, or harmonize the mind, or any of that stuff. It's all fine if you really want to do that. But you can start to see that there's nothing that needs to be attended to there. The same as you don't need to attend to your heartbeat. You don't need to attend to your breathing. You don't need to attend to digestion. You don't need to attend to any of the processes of the body-mind. It's all taken care of. It's all given completely, right? Most of us, I mean, maybe there are a few exceptions, but most of us are not worried about our heart beating, not worried about our next breath, not worried about blinking our eyes, not worried about whether or not we'll be able to digest our food. The body takes care of this. The body-mind takes care of this. And it's really only when we misuse our creative power and we're attending to a particular frequency of fear, fixating over and over and over, that we lose sight and forget who we are. And then we suffer, or we imagine that we suffer. So it's actually that simple. Let me just see if I've got it. How to get back to awareness where there seems to be a lot of emotion, sensation, and resistance to that sensation. So hopefully that's clear. Same thing. Whenever there's resistance or the appearance of resistance, it's an opportunity for the direct inquiry. It's not a thought. It's just the direct inquiry to notice in direct experience the reality of what it is that's happening. And this cannot be captured in thought. So necessarily, we're only looking, just inquiring directly into our own experience. So this is a very long response to your question. I hope this has been helpful. And if you, dear watcher, listener, have a question that you would like to ask, you can go to joeylott.com/ask. That's JOEYLOTT.com/ask. And if you have interest in my current events and opportunities to get coaching from me, you can go to joeylott.com/now, NOW. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.